animals have a fascinating way of connecting with humans. This is Mrs. Hagelin's horse, Red, and I'm going to get to read a story to him today all about Sergeant Reckless. She was a horse that worked for the United States Marines during the Korean War. She was loyal, and she became friends with the soldiers and the Marines at the time and was able to help defend them. Listen carefully and think about the story of loyalty and friendship and how she was a good, faithful friend. Sergeant Reckless, a true story of a little horse who became a hero. Written by Patricia McCormick and illustrated by Coco Bruno.
Sergeant Reckless, the true story of the little horse who became a hero. Written by Patricia McCormick, illustrated by Coco Bruno. The small red mare whinnied for her supper, but Korea was at war. Towns were shattered, fields were scorched, and the racetrack was abandoned. No one paid much attention to a hungry little horse. Nearby, the U.S. Marines were exhausted from hauling heavy ammunition uphill to the powerful new cannon nicknamed the Reckless Rifle. That's when the leader, Lieutenant Eric Peterson, had an idea. What if he could get a mule to carry the shells for them? But all Lieutenant Peterson could find was a scrawny sorrel mare with a white blaze and 3 matching socks. She wasn't much, but she reminded him of a horse that he had as a boy, so he took a chance on her. Back at the base, the Marines gathered around to meet the new recruit. Lieutenant Peterson realized that he had forgotten to buy hay. One of the men held out a piece of bread, and the mare gobbled it up. She devoured the rest of the loaf, and another man offered her a bowl of oatmeal. She licked the bowl clean. She was pretty, the Marines agreed, but she was small. How could she carry such heavy ammunition? And how would she react when she heard the thunder of the cannons? A mule was slow and steady, but a racehorse was high-strung and skittish. She had to go through special training. She had to start out at the same rank as any newbie, Private. She was Private Reckless. The first thing Private Reckless had to do was learn how to dodge incoming fire, which meant that her trainer, Sergeant Joseph Lanham, had to teach her how to kneel down. First, he gave her a sugar cube every time he tapped her front leg, then another one when she knelt down. Before long, the greedy little horse knelt down the moment he tapped her leg. Reckless also had to learn how to retreat. When Lanham gave the command, she had to trot back to the bunker where another reward was waiting. An apple or a chocolate candy bar or a peanut butter sandwich, even a can of beans, whatever it was, Reckless would eat it. Next, Lanham led her up a hill to the cannon. With a little coaxing and a lot of chocolate, she soon followed Lanham anywhere. Finally, she was fitted with a padded saddle, a padded wooden cargo frame with a leather strap across her legs and chest. Unlike a racing saddle, this was big and bulky and constricting. Lanham cinched the girth and the men stood back, expecting her to try and throw it off, but Reckless just stood there. They loaded the ammunition shells into her pack and waited for her to buck, but she just put her head down and marched up the hill. Her reward that day was an ice-cold Coca-Cola. By now, Reckless thought of herself as a member of the company and was free to roam around the camp. One morning, she showed up at the mess hall where the cook gave her an apple. She nudged his shoulder for more, so he offered her some scrambled eggs and toast. From then on, she ate the same breakfast as the men and washed it down with a cup of coffee. After she figured out which bunker belonged to the cook, she would clop into his tent at daybreak and lick his face until he woke up and served her breakfast. The men began looking forward to seeing the little horse with the big appetite, and they went into the chow hall. They had come to love her, but deep down they worried that when it came to a real battle, she might not have what it takes. One day, the Marines spotted enemy troops approaching. Instantly, they went into battle mode. Private Monroe Coleman saddled up Reckless and led her to the top of the hill. Boom! Just as they were delivering their load, a cannon went off. A blast of hot air and dust and gravel went flying towards the horse. Reckless jumped straight into the air, even with 6 shells on her back. Easy, girl, Coleman stroked her mane. Boom! Then another cannon roared. She jumped, but not as high this time. Boom! This time, Reckless just snorted. By the time the gun went off, Reckless was busy eating a helmet liner that she found in the grass. From then on, Reckless was one of the guys. On cold nights, she snuck into Lanham's tent and slept on the floor, and when the men played poker, she joined in. One night, she had eaten about $30 worth of chips before they had caught on. Reckless had served in more skirmishes, but her most dangerous assignment came at the Battle of Outpost, Vegas. That night, the men awoke to shells and white-hot flares falling inside the base. Reckless trotted back to her bunker trembling, and for the first time, she refused to eat. But the minute she was loaded with her pack, Reckless got to work. At the base of the path, she took a deep breath, pricked her ears forward, and charged up the hill. Without a word of urging, she broke into a trot, and then a gallop. The heavy shells banged against her sides as they hit the steep incline. The first rays of dawn were lighting the sky as she arrived at the top of the trail, her flanks heaving. The sky was full of smoke. Shells whizzed by and cannons boomed. All day, Reckless marched up and down the windy path, hauling her load as she passed her fellow Marines along the way. They gave her chocolate bars to keep up her strength. Then, a piece of shrapnel hit Reckless over her left eye. Blood trickled down onto her white blaze, but she kept going. Later, another piece of shrapnel hit her left flank. After a dab of iodine and a drink of water, she was back to work. Night fell as sizzling flares cast eerie shadows on the landscape. The Marines began to tire, but then they saw the little mare's silhouette on the ridge, her head hanging as she put everything she had into her job. She was soaked with sweat, lathered, curling up over her saddle. When she came back down the hill, one by one the men took off their body armor jackets and laid them on her to protect her. By the end of the day, Reckless had made 51 trips, gone a distance of 35 miles up and down steep terrain, carried 9,000 pounds of ammunition, and that battle helped change the course of the war. At last, there was a ceasefire, and Reckless was able to rest. The Marines promoted Reckless to sergeant, and they came one by one to say goodbye to the little mare who had shown as much heart on the battlefield as any man among them. When they got home, they started a campaign to bring Reckless to the United States. A ship owner agreed to pay her passage, and the men took up a collection to buy her a beautiful scarlet and gold blanket with sergeant stripes. But by the time the boat arrived, Reckless had eaten her blanket, ribbons and all. Sergeant Reckless was a little mare who became a Marine and is the only animal to hold official military rank. She received 2 Purple Hearts and retired with full military honors and the rank of Staff Sergeant. Her story is a testament to the mysterious bond between humans and animals and proof of the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis, ever faithful.
Author's note. The Korean War started in 1950 when the troops from the North crossed into the divided line between the communist-backed North Korea and the American-backed South Korea. The fighting went on for 3 years, and the Americans were concerned that a wider war with the Soviet Union and China would erupt, setting off possibly a third world war. Finally, after 5 million military and civilian deaths, the fighting ceased. No peace treaty was ever signed, and the Korean Peninsula is still divided today. I first learned about Sergeant Reckless from a Veterans Day article in the New York Times featuring the cook, who was the 5th Marine Regiment Sergeant
broccoli? No.
John T. Myers, who made Reckless her morning coffee and eggs and lived not far from me, as happy to talk about the little horse who ate everything in sight. In the morning, she poked her head into the tent and licked him until he woke up, and then she would follow him into the mess hall. While Sergeant Reckless was famous for her appetite, it was her heroism on the battlefield that made her a legend in one battle. She rescued a group of men who were pinned down by enemy fire. She also allowed them to escape by shielding them. After she carried the wounded Marines up the hill, Reckless displayed her fearlessness in a big heart early on. She was originally owned by a Korean boy named Kim Hook-moon, who named her Flame because of her reddish coat and her fiery speed on the racetrack. But when war broke out in Seoul, Korea, Kim had to flee, hitching Flame to a cart filled with his family's belongings. The last bridge out of town was too crowded to cross, so Kim harnessed Flame and led her to the river's edge. With Kim's little sister clinging to her tail, Flame swam to the other side, and then came back, and one by one she ferried his nieces and nephews and his mother to safety. Later, when his sister stepped on a landmine, Kim was devastated that he had to sell Flame to pay for her medical care. But after Reckless came to the United States, she lived out her days on a grassy compound at Camp Pendleton in California and mothered 3 foals: Fearless, Dauntless, and Chesty. An official letter about her retirement care specified that she should be given Coca-Cola in limited amounts and scrambled eggs lightly salted without pepper. She is now honored with a life-size statue at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Isn't that really awesome, Red? What a great story. I'm excited that we get to read it together. Now, let's go write about what you think and give the story stars for this week's book.
The end.